Hello and welcome to Varn blog / Regrettable Century, at least half of it. And we are talking about a broad overarching topic and one that I get the most pushback on. The two things I've gotten the most pushback on lately is one, not talking about war all the time. And that will be actually discussed in our discussion today, I think, about why I don't talk about geopolitics constantly. Even though I think geopolitical education is important. And two, my pessimism. I've been increasingly critiqued by everybody from Marxist to Platonist. I mean, I know why Platonists would hate me anyway, but that I am too pessimistic. And it's interesting because I do not interpret what I'm saying as particularly fatalistic or despairing. So I wanted to parse out what we meant by pessimism as opposed to revolutionary optimism, which for me, I'm just going to lay out the cards. Revolutionary optimism for me, 99.9% of the time is delusion. It is voluntarism on speed. So I find that when I'm like reading things like you know, I don't know, everything from David Graeber and David Wingrove's Adorno, everything to contemporary like Marxist-Leninist material. I tend to find that there's just an active ignorance of counterforces and unforeseen consequences that's like blatant, and that a lot of emphasis is put on will,
Yeah.
in a way that, I don't think any of us here are like die-hard materialist in the strictest sense of that term. I think we all are methodologically materialistic,
Mm-hmm.
But in a way that just seems anti-materialist to me. Like that it sees human agency as unbounded.
Right. That's sort of the like one of the Maoist contributions to the American left, I think, is that just assertion of will in place of ripened material conditions, or instead of a reliance on ripe material conditions. The idea that you can force things to happen.
There's also a very teleological kind of understanding of history as being unidirectional and basically automatic. Like there's no dialectic at work. It just happens. And also, in addition to the fact that everything happens and it's always positive, if we will it to be so, then it will be even better still. That's it.
And I would say, I said Maoist, and I think that is definitely a part of the Maoist contribution, but it's also the anarchist contribution to American politics. It's just to which a certain extent I appreciate, right? The reinsertion of human agency into the equation, because I think that, and I will probably talk about this, a lot of the Marxist view of revolution is based on inevitability, right? And there's a lot of sitting around waiting for the crisis to break things open that is part of that, be it like the left communists or the Marxist-Leninists in the past, right?
Well, I mean, Marxist-Leninism is a tradition that kind of waffles all over the place. It's the problem with the state tradition is there's other things,
right,
than philosophical consistency driving a lot of its pronouncements. But there is a sense in which, like, both in the late 40s and also in the 1920s, there was a sense that a crisis was inevitable, war was inevitable, and Stalin ended up being right about that war was inevitable and not right about who it was going to be with. And because it's pretty clear to me that Stalin's war preparations were to fight Britain and
the Western Allies.
The Western Allies.
Yeah.
He actually seemed somewhat shocked by Hitler forcing his hand early.
Yeah, he I think was planning on the Nazis and the Western Allies to bleed each other to death. He was hoping for that. He was very surprised by, first of all, Hitler's successes in the West, and then Hitler being able to turn east as quickly as he did.
So the entire 20th century, in many ways, was a challenge to the inevitabilism that became Soviet doctrine. I have read a ton of Marx now, and I see both Marx has this way of talking inevitabilistically in public, but not in private, which is very interesting to think about. In his letters, you see him like going after the SPD and stuff in ways that make it very clear that he does not think their victory is guaranteed.
Right.
That is also true in his writings of the U.S. Civil War. Like,
right.
But when he writes his philosophical and analytical treatises, he does seem to think that the only way out of the problem is communism, and in that sense, it's inevitable, or the common ruin of everything.
Yeah, now, that's the part that gets left out in a lot of people's formulations.
Right. And I think that last bit is interesting to like deal with, because the one thing I get from reading Marx, maybe more than Engels, is that on one hand, he thinks that the contradictions of capitalism mean that for, the promises of bourgeois society to be delivered on, you're going to need something beyond bourgeois society, right?
Right.
At the same time, you're getting like and look at what bourgeois society does the moment it has power. Like, it's a reversion to a prior norm, That's why the Brumaire ends up being such a crucial text, because the Brumaire is the indication that Marx, and it's a polemical writing, so we can take it seriously because it's public, but that Marx is not a Whiggish thinker, because if he's Whiggish, you can't make any sense out of what's going on in France after the revolution. And I think that's interesting, but I do think by the time you get to, like, say, the mid 1920s, once Lenin's dying, this optimism and this inevitability thesis is pretty much, it's super normalized in all parts of the communist left. Like, so if we look at it in a spectrum, let's talk about the council communist. Like, they actually think that history's progressed so far, we don't need a party or trade unions anymore.
Right. The workers are just going to spontaneously just make socialism, and all we have to do is just acknowledge it, and that's it, really.
Acknowledge it and provide them Soviets.
Well,
yeah.
Right. Like,
organize the Soviets once the crisis produces the revolutionary situation.
Right. Which is one of the interesting things about, say, Heinrich Grossman thought. All right. Mm-hmm. The areas, once Grossman leaves the Frankfurt School, the people who pick him up are dissident Marxist-Leninists on one hand, and council communists like Paul Maddock on the other. All right. So that's something to notice. Now, later on, Grossman gets rehabilitated in the 1990s by Trotskyists. Actually, as early as the 1970s by Trotskyists. Jarius Banerjee translates him into English for the first time, which is wild to me, that a book that was literally published in America was not translated fully into English until like the aughts, and the first translation in the 70s was done in India.
Yeah,
like it's crazy. But so Grossman, to me, is the, like, negative form of cold Marxism. And this is why we talk about hot and cold Marxism as opposed to scientific and unscientific, because there's also the positive form of cold Marxism, which is the productive forces form.
Yeah.
But they have different mechanisms, but they both operate effectively the same way. Something is going to happen at which there's a tipping point, either immiseration and crisis or productive forces development. And all we really have to do is take the reins of the state and then start to devolve the state by doing so.
Right. And which is sort of, I guess, like the first is tragedy would be that like Grossman's type thinking. And the second is farce would be the fully automatic luxury communism meme / group of I don't know. It's not really a tendency, but sort of it's more of like an internet meme that people took seriously.
Yeah, accelerationism, right? But like, if we looked at
that's what counts as the tendency now. That's the closest to a tendency that there is an internet meme that people take seriously.
I mean, that's true. Yeah. But like, if we look at like Chinese developmentalism, it does operate off like after the 1970s, we revived the economy by dropping all this will stuff from Maoism. I mean, that's what they're effectively doing.
Yeah.
Particularly after the whateverist school loses. And literally that's what it's called. It's a center tendency that Mao appoints to like deal with the Gang of Four and the Dengist faction. And the Dengist faction actually appeals to much of the left in China, at least according to Ralph Ruckus, to take power from the center, and then proceeds to do stuff like get rid of education for girls in the countryside and desocialize all medicine.
Right, which is one of the wildest things. I had gone most of my entire life thinking that China at least had socialized medicine. It wasn't until like maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I actually realized that they didn't.
No, they have a system closest to the United States of any other country.
It was so wild for me to find that out. I was just like, wait a minute, what the fuck? Like I consider myself relatively well educated on stuff like this, and I didn't realize that, because it's something that China apologists just don't touch. They never touch it.
Yeah, like almost ever.
No, China apologists. Well, go ahead.
Oh, just Xi Jinping thought. If you like really study it, you really look into what the kind of stuff that people around that school of thought, what they write about. It's very, very. It's the coldest possible stream. It's like ice cold.
Yeah. Oh, Xi Jinping thought is basically like we're finally gonna do in the 21st century what the Americans did in the 1930s, which is like build a social safety net, reintroduce elements of socialized medicine, but not fully socialized healthcare. Rein in some of the lack of controls over stuff like education. I mean, one of the things about China, as I used to say as a foreign educator, we used to consider it the Wild East. Add some ecology to their developmentalism. I mean, I'll give them credit for that. Like,
yeah.
But that leads me to say the following. Oh, China's just the most responsible capitalist power. Which is like
most successful bourgeois revolution.
Yeah.
And yes, I do think China has people in it. I mean, by China, I don't just mean Chinese people. I mean the the PCP,
People's Republic. Yeah.
Yeah, and the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
I mean the CPC. Excuse me, I said that wrong.
PCP.
I said it the PCP. No, the CPC. Although that bit of branding is weird to me when they're like, "Oh, you Westerners are trying to ruin us by making it sound like the CCCP or whatever." I'm like, so you're ashamed of being related to the USSR?
Right. Like, I mean, I think they are though.
They are.
Yeah.
Because the USSR didn't last, and they will last.
But there was a lot of optimism coming from that. That is dying because China's growth rate is now mirrored perfectly the West, and they have now had a a real estate crisis that is actually larger than the one that happened in the West, but won't affect us. It's a larger crisis, but in a bigger economy. And it's unclear if the Chinese are going to let it like roll out to all of society, and to the extent that it did in the United States. Although, if they do, and we're still learning as it's happening right now, that might be real interesting for everyone's growth plans.
I mean, officially, that's their plan. Officially,
right.
They're trying to achieve a moderately prosperous society, but who knows what the actuality will be.
Right.
They should expropriate some of their billionaires.
I mean, they do have more than the United States does.
Right.
Not as a percentage of the population.
They have lots to spare. Yeah.
Yeah. This is not. So the optimism that people were trying to get out of Xi seems to be stalling. And they're looking for it everywhere. I mean, some people look for it in the modern Russian state, which seems to me the wildest of the options. Like trying to argue, like, sure, like NATO getting egg on its face over turning Ukraine into a pit, which, by the way, I tend to think was NATO's goal the whole time.
I absolutely think it was. I think that NATO, I've said this multiple to turn Ukraine, Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, which just, ties Russia up for a decade. You know?
Right.
I mean, they've admitted to it. Like the several people that are in positions of power among the ruling class of the United States have admitted to as much. It's like, oh yeah, we're killing Russians and destroying Russian equipment without having to expend American lives.
Which, leads to a very dark view of the immediate future, particularly when you look at the growing persistence of proxy wars. But then again, if you're a people who's not a proxy war, let's say the Palestinians, you don't have a whole lot of hope of anyone helping you either.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and that is the rub right now. So I find it interesting that a lot of leftists are going to geopolitics for hope, which I mean, I get that multipolarity implies that the U.S. empire is dying down. It's still going to be a pole, probably the pole, just not the only pole in a world of fighting poles. That's implied in multipolarity unless you have a stabilized multipolarity, and no one seems to have figured out how that would happen.
Well, right. and it's not going to feel any different if you live in Detroit or wherever. It's going to feel the same during the explicit multipolarity as it did during the period before. Like there's no tangible benefit or difference really.
Well, this is one of the things about another source of lefty hope these days that I consider eschatological, which is third worldism.
Yeah.
The most exploited, poorest workers who, a lot of cases, are not even actually workers. They're people shut out of work through things like labor arbitrage and precarity. You have mass unemployment, mass lumpenization, and somehow they're going to overthrow the capitalist regimes of the core.
Like, if you would have made an argument about third worldism in the 1960s, I might want to listen to it, right?
Right.
Like, just Che Guevara's 1, 2, 3, many Vietnams or whatever to tie up the American imperial war machine and collapse the United States. But I might have listened to that idea. That, to me, it doesn't make any sense, especially with how secondary and tertiary the profits from extraction are to the core. I think that third worldism operates on a model of extraction and a world economy that doesn't exist anymore.
No, I think their model is 19th century economics and the 1960s politics.
Right.
And that's yeah, that's not gonna fly. Like, so you just have it as an external rating. It seems like when people hit this despairing point and they instead of giving up on inevitabilism, all right, what they do is they revive some idea of the past. I mean, Ulster Worldism was basically a revision, a revival of an old idea,
right?
Sort
of. I mean, it's sort of a revival of early thoughts that sprung out of the foundation of the Comintern, long after the collapse of the Comintern. But the Comintern thought it was going to happen in the Far East, not Africa, South America, and maybe a couple of spots in Southeast Asia.
I feel like when was Zinoviev head of the Comintern? Because as far back as like sometime in the mid 1920s, there was a official a turn toward the peasantry and the Far East. So it's really by the time the 60s comes around, it's really the third iteration.
Right.
So, so we get that when the 60s comes around, you get third worldism. You get Jay Sakai thought when that fails. And let's talk about how that failed, because it was a very specific movement through the unions in the 1970s. When the New Left failed, there was a faction of the New Communist Movement, which we often talk about as if the New Left and the New Communist Movement are the same thing, just like we talk about the hippies and the New Left as the same thing, and none of those things are really the same thing.
They're related, but they're definitely not the same thing.
Right. Well, when people talk about the New Left's anti-Stalinism, that doesn't apply to the New Communist Movement.
No,
yeah,
not at all.
Not at all.
Well, I guess you could talk if you talk about like the Progressive Labor Party, which start off as Maoists and then become like hyper-Stalinists.
They become like Hojists or something, right?
Exactly. Like, they're like Stalinist communizers, really. They're like, we need to skip over basically apply a Stalinist, a hyper-Stalinist regime to skip over socialism and go straight into communism.
Right.
Well, I mean, this is where the historiographies of the left that gave us what we have today gets interesting and weird, because we always bracket out the Gen X left, all right? But let's talk about what the key luminaries of the Gen X left were. All right. So you have these former Marxist-Leninists who get frustrated with sectional bargaining in Italy because of screwing over their own workers. Mm-hmm. And that leads to Optimism and Autonomism.
Right.
During the days of lead, a lot of those people flee into like French academia and hook up with post-Marxists in France who are very frustrated. And I want to contextualize this, because we're always complaining about postmodernism, but let's remind people that post-Marxism didn't come out of nothing. It came out of the French communists getting on the reformist side of the Mitterrand government and basically allowing themselves to be liquidated.
Right.
So it's interesting that the people angry at that, instead of like becoming more Marxist, they give up on Marxism entirely, or they go into the ultra left and then eventually give up on Marxism entirely. So you have another tendency that like leaves the situationists and this kind of like quasi-cancelist but artsy tradition, which is uniquely French, goes into Bordigist and council communist currents, tries to combine the two. That's where communization comes from.
Is that my cat coughing? Are you guys picking that up on the microphone? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I think she's on my desk purring and coughing, but I'll mute myself.
So then you have what this leads to, interestingly, is this inversion of teleology, and it gives you the beginnings of what would become Anarcho Primitivism. All right.
Yeah.
Which comes back to America in weird ways. So
Anarcho Primitivism is wild in its like myriad of formation. I mean, it's myriad of incarnations in the United States. Everything from just like, right-wing nationalism, but like ethno-nationalism, right-wing ethno-nationalism, to like, of course, and a weird turf. Like what was his name? The guy from Derek Jensen. There we go. Yeah, like weird turf anarcho primitivism that, I mean, it's all pseudo-reactionary, but like some of it's pseudo-reactionary, some of it's straight up reactionary. But yeah, it's anarcho primitivism is wild. I would love to do an episode about that one day, just because of how fun it would be to dig into all that.
I mean, what's interesting is when you and I were coming up, that was a dominant on campus's intellectual tendency.
Absolutely.
I mean, that was the left for like all of my teenage and early 20s. That was what the left was.
We were in Austin, and it was like, that's where Derek Jensen was in Austin. So like we dealt with those people all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's that milieu in the aughts, and that comes out of specific train of failure out of the New Left. I find that a lot of people tend to start and stop at the New Left and then jump to like Occupy as if there's nothing in between. Because a lot of the stuff,
everything in between is very confusing.
Yeah.
And so if you just jump from the New Left to Occupy, it's very straightforward. It's wrong, but it's easy to make sense of.
Yeah, and it's sort of like people get mad at us for the way we talk about anarchism, but like when we talk about anarchism, we're talking about the legacy of what's left over from the 90s, which is it's like Adbusters shit, you know. It's all based around consumption politics and
or like Earth First and
Earth First, yeah.
What's that journal that's like a
Green Anarchy?
I mean, that works too. I can't think of what it's called. I'll remember later.
Yeah.
The thing is, one thing that we have to admit, if social democrats revive the democratic center, anarchists revive Marxism.
Explain that one to me.
Because it is Adbuster ideas that brought about Occupy Wall Street.
Sure, yeah.
It was David Graeber that brought Graeberite ideas that brought about Occupy Wall Street. The Trotskyists and the Maoist sects that existed at the time of Occupy largely died. There are exceptions, all right, but there aren't many. So what did that actually do? Well, it proved to people on a scale, because of the nature of these populist revolts, it proved to people that the Adbuster politics didn't mean anything. But those people didn't go away. Naomi Klein didn't go away. The anarcho-liberal didn't go away. The people that Bhaskar Sankara were writing about in Dissent magazine in 2008 are the people that write for him in 2020.
Sure. Okay.
They just
that makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah. I was thinking of Crime Think.
There we go. Yeah.
Crime Think. Remember Crime Think?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
The Crime Think guy made fun of me for not speaking good enough Mandarin at Occupy when I was visiting from New York, from South Korea. He also went to Sarah Lawrence. I just want to point that out.
Of course he did. I have some real good friends who were Crime Think anarchists back in the day. I mean, because we grew up in like the punk rock and hardcore scenes, and like a lot of those people were like Crime Think and not anarcho individualists, not like Stirnerites or anything, but like that's stripe of 90s anarchists that were really into squatters, right? That were really into like anti-work politics and at
the very best were like anti-racist action. But that was kind of a smaller world, actually.
Right.
Well, it's interesting to think about, coming out of the punk scene, because, I ended up really homeless, following squats around, like actually dangerously homeless, following squats around when I was 18. And I had been precariously homeless before, but like that politics I rejected, because I literally ended up like hanging out with like people dying of AIDS, like on the streets of Atlanta in 1999, and then went to a Buddhist monastery like to get shelter.
So and that was really like you live like a 15 song.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, so I got sucked up in that world, and I was a working class kid without resources, and I didn't really understand that like it was very stupid to do without resources, and most of the people I knew who were doing it were middle class and had resources. They were just hiding it from you.
Right. We had a friend a dude that we knew from back home whose parents were both like doctors that used to, find a coffee shop every once in a while and upload his photos on his laptop that he took with his digital camera from train hopping, and call us petty bourgeois because we were in college.
He also really, really hated like people who were homeless, but not by choice.
Yeah.
He called them scum fucks. His homelessness, because it was adopted, that was okay. But the people who were homeless because they had no other choice, they were actually a problem.
Yeah, there's real weird sort of like hostile conservatism that's all mixed into that milieu, because I think there's no sort of ideology that anyone actually sticks to outside of like a small group of anarcho punks that were based or like sort of congregated around the hardcore scene back then.
Yeah, it's all downstream of Protestantism. The individual matters a whole lot, and nothing else matters at all.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, I mean, I would what was interesting is like there's an essay I wrote when I was 22 years old. It's available on the internet somewhere. Good luck finding it.
I'm starting to look.
About apocalypticism, where I wrote about gutter punks and stuff like that who would go in and like they would become like Pentecostals, or they get involved with like weird forms of Christian orthodoxy, like Father Seraphim Rose shit. Like the Deaf to the World movement and stuff like that. And for me, talk about it in the way that the kids today talk about it, was a primary form of trauma. As a person with PTSD, I'm being sarcastic. Like, it wasn't really that traumatic. It's something different. But
everything is trauma.
The way I would say I adopted and moved from that was to become conservative, but a weird kind of conservatism. Like, and what was interesting about what I was, is I didn't hate the poor. I didn't hate homeless people. I didn't see them as scum. I kind of thought that we needed to revive some kind of national subjectivity, and we needed a new one because like the race one was stupid.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any idea what it was going to be. And I also like didn't have a good grasp on any kind of economics at all. Even when I went through college, but mostly what I responded to was like the Hart and Nagiri, and then the like Derridian, like hyper ironic post-structuralism of the 1990s, early aughts, which I think like we've kind of forgotten about. Like they were like, it was de rigueur, then everyone attacked it in a stupid way. I mean, in a way that like removed it, like, oh, just like there's all this Marxist form of like almost Jordan Petersonism, like, oh, postmodernism is ruining us. And
I was just a little bit too young for that. I was aware of it, but like barely.
I think you had to be in the academy. One of the things that changed, that kind of made me more pessimistic, actually, was that I think, and this is the thesis that I think makes people uncomfortable, whenever we complain about the PMC or whatever, we pretend that those ideas have not bled out to the general public now in a way that affects working class people. Because everyone has access to it through blogs and shit. Like, it's no longer an elite discourse alone. Now, there's plenty of people who have no idea any of this stuff. I guarantee you that, like, a teenager who works at a gas station who talks about privilege does not actually know who Kimberly Crenshaw is. But these ideas now are, like, in the broader cultural milieu, in the way that, like, say, existentialism was in the 80s and 90s, right?
Yeah.
Even though it was like 30 years out of date in academia.
Yeah.
So in that sense, there is like a cultural power effect, right? And that made me actually kind of depressed, because I didn't think these ideas were going to serve people very well who came up working class, because a lot of what they end up doing, and this is one of the reasons why I became more and more in the revolutionary pessimist vein, is leftist ideas often start from a good place and with a grain of truth, but they encourage maladaptive values because they assume they already have power.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like our criticisms that we're making about the third camp, right? Like the impulses that lead people to align with third campism are good impulses, right? You know, that is exactly the problem is acting like that there is actually something to be done, and that's what ends up aligning most third campists in the first camp in the first place.
Yeah, we were talking about that, like because I was like, I think you're coming down too hard on third campus. You know, Zimmerwald West, the Zimmerwald left is a third campus position. That is also the classical Marxist position.
That is the good third campus,
right? But
the problem is when the third camp doesn't exist and you still maintain that absolute fealty to it, and you have to act in its name, but it doesn't exist, so you have to substitute one of the other two for it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that makes you guys' position actually, with the except, not to speak for Kevin, I'm gonna have to bracket Kevin out here because he has a different position than you two.
Increasingly.
You guys are no campist.
Yes.
Like
if everyone's over here in the camp, I'm by myself over here, just sleeping under a tree.
Right.
Yeah. When it comes to like an empirical observation of the world, you have to recognize that the third camp is not currently constituted. But if I have a much more complex and dialectical understanding of what could be and what is to be, I maintain my hopes and my aspirations for that third camp. But right now, yeah, there's just not one.
Yeah, I mean, and like, it never was like, oh, the problem with the third camp never was that you needed to pick a side. The problem always was that by opposing the Soviet Union and actively opposing the Soviet Union while living in the West, you're essentially you're just in the first camp, right?
Right.
And in a place where you can't really affect the outcome of these conflicts. Like specifically right now, what's on my mind is thinking about Ukraine and Russia. You can't really what, Jason?
We just think about during the Cold War, you have some unions, large groups of workers who are in the Communist Party's orbit. And then the AFL-CIO is officially in the State Department's orbit. And so the organization of workers is already decided. And so by virtue of trying to act against the second camp, you are automatically picking the first camp.
Right. Yeah. And it's the same type of situation that it's going on right now, except for without any sort of ideological battle. It's like the Cold War is farce, where
it's way dumber now.
It's way dumber. But yeah,
I like to think of it as the 19th century with Cold War characteristics, and it's the great game, and I feel like we've been in great game world since 9/11. Actually, that's my
absolutely. And which side do you come down in the 19th century standoff between Russia and Germany, right?
Right. The reason why it has Cold War characteristics is nuclear weapons and drones. And the drones are really becoming an equalizing battle. I remember arguing with someone like in 2010. It was some fucking Obama drone policy is good. It risks less American lives. And I'm like, well, what's going to happen? You know, just from the standpoint of empire, you dipshit, when the Houthis, I didn't use the Houthis, but I'm just going to use them because they're a perfect example of the day. A stateless people who are basically under international law acting as both insurrectionaries and pirates, right? That's what they'd be classified as under international law because they don't have a state. Who are fighting a civil war and also fighting U.S. trade with drones. right?
Yeah.
And I was like, eventually drones are not that hard of technology. They're basically just souped up remote airplanes. You know,
Yeah, they're kind of like muskets in the sense of like you could be, before you had to be a very wealthy in order to make knights and make armies of knights. Then all of a sudden you just have any random poor person with a musket. It's like knights don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Muskets were the beginning of people's militias again, which we had moved away from combat specializations, which required massive amounts of both physical and literal training resources and stuff that took a lifetime of stuff and made a whole class of people who were basically murder hobos. But
the Freikorps of the
the first Freikorps,
and the second Freikorps.
I've gotten really into studying like the material conditions behind the Crusades, and I do think there's sincere belief behind the Crusades, but a lot of it's like, we got all these murder hobos that are just killing each other. Let's go throw them at some Saracens so that they're not killing all of our peasants, so that we don't have any food.
So you know that like at the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there was a lot of talk about whether or not armor was obsolete because it was being taken out super easily by small teams that were coordinating with drones to just annihilate armor columns. That conversation went away when armor adapted its usage. The usage of armor was adapted to deal with that. But like, yeah, I mean, it's just like, this is a revolution in military affairs that's going on right now. And it's like sort of leveling the playing field in a way that we haven't seen since probably the invention of the machine gun.
And we saw hints of it in the Wars on Terror. We did. But now we're really seeing it. What ironically though it's interestingly turning into is early 19th century tech, like basic fucking artillery, is beginning to matter again.
Right, which is why we've got basically a World War I style trench warfare going on in the Donbass, which is chewing up the youth of Ukraine and Russia right now. But Russia's got a bigger population to spare. Ukraine doesn't.
Right. Well, one of the things that I was trying to tell someone that really shocks me a little bit is like, I know almost the exact dead in the Israel-Palestine war, and that's horrifying, but like it's also very clear. Like there's like 600 IDF soldiers, if you include the maybe 700 now. If you include the dead on October 7th, you get like 2,000, and then it's like 30 to 35,000 Palestinians.
Right.
All right, which is awful. I mean, it's almost 1.5% of the Gazan population.
Fewer than 5,000 of those are actually like Hamas or fighters in any way. It's
like 80% of them are non-combatants, effectively.
Right.
Yeah. It's a massacre. It's shooting into a locked room. To call it a war is actually kind of a farce, but I want to compare that with the Russia-Ukraine war. All right. And this is when Clausewitzian logic starts to reapply. It's somewhere between 200,000 and 400,000 Ukrainian dead, and somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 Russian dead. And by the way, the fact that there's an order of 100,000 vagueness on both sides is pretty impressive.
It's because they're both lying their asses off.
Right. But what it really comes down to
officially Ukraine is like, they're admitting to only 30,000 losses, which is
bullshit.
Nobody believes that at all.
No one believes that, including the United States.
The United States doesn't believe that either.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
You don't get up to your average soldier age being 41.
It's higher now. I believe it's 43.
Fuck me.
Yeah. To be fair, they are not conscripting people in their late teens and early 20s yet, because they're the war has been so brutal that they don't want to kill off the future of their country. But they're going to have to, because they are out. They're out of troops. They're out of conscription aged population. So they're going to have to start recruiting the younger people. And it's an untenable situation. They're right now they're losing a war of attrition, and no one wants to admit that.
I don't think NATO has a problem with that, though, because I think that they want an insurgency, which won't happen as long as the Russians stay east of Kharkiv, but becomes very different once they go west of it.
Which I don't know they will. That's
I don't think they will either. That's the thing.
Not at this point. I mean, Putin wants to sit on top of what he's gotten and then, like, eventually extract himself from the conflict. From a war of attrition that he wins, and he can pretend like that's what he was trying to do the whole time. Because there's no winning this in a conventional way. Like there's no regime change that's ever going to happen.
So this is my point about modern war. All right, another reason why I'm pessimistic. When's the last time someone actually achieved their fucking war goals?
When was the U.S. invasion of Grenada? 1980.
There we go.
Yeah.
So
83, something like that.
So an obviously farcically uneven war. I guess maybe in a dark sense, it looks like Israel may achieve what it wants to do in Palestine and Gaza.
I don't think so. I highly doubt it, actually.
124,000 people live in Grenada right now. And that's like half the population of Lubbock, Texas, you know?
I don't know.
I mean, certainly in part, but I think that the after effects, the ramifications of that victory are going to be enormous. Like, so much more far-reaching than the Israelis are prepared for and will accept.
They've lost the public relations war
with everybody.
Like I have, as a person who's been following Israel-Palestine relations and has been a hardcore partisan for the Palestinian cause since I was a teenager over 20 years ago. This is the only time in my life where across the board, everyone is fed up with Israel, except American Zionists, obviously.
Yeah. I was going to say, except for American liberals, nobody else in the world is even partially a little bit kind of pro-Israeli.
Even then, man, there's like the Democratic Party's base is.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, I was about to say it's
establishment liberals, though. Sure,
it's establishment liberals over 50. What the way I was talking to Anan Hussein, and we said it looks like the general population has now swung pro-Palestinian, which this is the first that's ever happened. Like,
that's wild to me.
The general population is, I mean. Although I don't think it has anything to do with what the left is doing. I think it has everything to do with what the IDF posts on fucking TikTok.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's very possibly going to lose Biden the election, which is fucking just nuts to me.
I mean, it's
he deserves it
in a sense, yeah.
But yeah, it's funny.
It is.
But it's also illustrative of what people have been getting mad at me about this on this issue is me going like, you putting pressure on politicians for this may matter on this one issue. All right, it may, because popular opinion's in your favor. But your protest is really only for the people here. That's what it's for. I'm not saying not do it. But like, be completely clear that there's no fucking protest anywhere in the goddamn world that's going to be world historic on ending a war. That isn't really what happened in the 60s either, but we've lied to ourselves about that for a long time. And I know I'm one of the few people's like the anti-war movement in America didn't matter that much. But
yeah, I mean, like,
again, the anti-war movement in America didn't matter that much.
It really did. In Vietnam, they do have monuments to the American anti-war movement, but it's not because they think it mattered, that they don't think it helped. It's just that they say, "Oh, at least that's good that you did that." That's it. It's like it's a participation trophy.
Yeah. You know what defeated the United States at Vietnam was the Tet Offensive.
Right.
Yeah. It was Vietnamese people deciding I would rather die than live under this regime. That's what did it. It's the only thing that ever does anything.
Right. I mean, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what protest is for. And so the other thing I don't really love doing is, like, there's a lot of real misunderstandings that go on with perpetuating moral sentiments about, like, the nature of nationalism and all that. Where I'm like, yeah, you know, Palestinian nationalism is totally legitimate because, you know, because it's facing, I mean, you're talking about people facing what amounts to what was a slow ethnic cleansing, what has now become an attempt at a quick one. And by international law, that's genocide. I do wonder, though, in the long durée, what we're going to think about all this, because there has this discourse has been kind of stuff like indigeneity and land in a way that I like wonder how people are going to deal with when we're going to have to deal with mass movements of the population in response to climate change. I don't like we are going to live in the age of mass movement. The ages of mass movement are historically hyper destabilizing. Like, you know, the Bronze Age collapse, that's an age of mass movement. You know, even if you don't think it was actually a collapse, like the germification of the germification of Europe, that's all those. I mean, I know we forget this, but Germans were at one time Asian steppe peoples.
Right.
Like, probably.
Well, like the Celts used to occupy like most of Western and Southern Europe. And the Slavs, at some point, they came from the east. The Huns came from very far in the east. There have been huge population transfers, and there's never been a peaceful one, ever.
No, it also usually isn't genocidal. Also, I mean, what usually happens?
Yeah, generally not. No.
One side conquers the other, and then they intermarry. But I mean, like, genetically speaking, the difference between Germans and Celts now is like pretty thin.
Yeah.
Even in like Scotland, but it's, you know, but it is hyper destabilizing, right? And so here's why I am pessimistic in the broad sense, and I want to turn it to why this pessimism might be dialectically useful for a positive turn in politics. I think the stressors of contemporary society are going to lead people to double down on things that make them feel safe, and that, for the most part, is the false security of borders and ethno-nationalism. They might. I do not think racial nationalism is going to be the dominant form of ethno-nationalism. I don't actually. I think like it's too divisive in most societies to keep the societies together. But you probably will see something like, you know, American chauvinism come back, but with the old, like, not biologically racialist, but like anyone can become an American.
Right. I mean, that's what we're seeing now.
Right.
I mean, like the big swing of South Texas Latinos towards Trump in this last election. It's like a guaranteed demographic for the Democrats has now gone over to Trump because of like border concerns, quote unquote.
It's also a very important part of Brexit. The very big aspect of valence of Brexit. It wasn't entirely that, but it was a huge part of it.
Well, I think the alt-right was kind of a distraction from the larger rebirth of nationalism.
Yeah.
Because racial nationalism is easy for everybody to hate, but most liberals they're nationalists somewhere deep down in their bone because they're methodologically nationalists, is nothing else. All their programs are based on nation states.
Yeah.
I mean, and when they try to buck up against that, like with abolish borders or abolish the police, it becomes immediate that they're being somewhat insincere. Like,
right. Yeah.
Because they don't ever try to do sure, you could do that. You want to abolish the police. You know the best way to do it? Universal conscription militia. By the way, all my anarchist friends, if they're honest, that's what they think would have to happen.
That's what George Orwell proposed. That whenever before this U.S. entered the Second World War, that was the idea. It was like, well, we don't have a big enough army to handle a Nazi invasion, but if everybody had to do something, maybe we could do it.
Yeah, and then
then afterward, we could make socialism or whatever.
Yeah, he wanted to make universal conscription into the Home Guard, and then use the Home Guard as a workers' militia to institute socialism.
Yeah.
He had some wild beliefs.
There's a lot of stuff wrong with George Orwell, but
just to point out that this is part of
the
cosmonaut platform, and they're in the socialist republicanism. They want that too.
I actually think it's a good idea. It's not by itself, but it's not it shouldn't be dismissed out of hand altogether.
Using a universal conscription to overthrow the state?
No, not that.
Okay, I'm
that. I think Cosmonaut may actually kind of want. I'm gonna let them represent themselves on that, because the mug tendency, they do want to use something both electoral and non-electoral to overthrow the Constitution. So
I
don't disagree with them on the Constitution. So.
I want to do that too, but how? That's the thing. Honestly, the Marxist Unity Group's idea of a double-pronged sort of it's early Kautskyist version of how to take state power is to use the state and movements from above and below. Yeah, sure, that's a great idea, but how?
My thinking about this is a lot like the third camp. Yeah, sure, it's a great idea. It's even the only one that would be possible and would work. But where is it?
Well, my thing is you still haven't revitalized the workers' institutions to make a workers' party.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Well, right, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's
what
they want to do.
Yeah, I know they do, but it seems to me, I know their theory. I believe I understand their theory. Again, I'm probably gonna call them up and have them throw some of their constitutional thinkers on my show to talk about it. But I tend to think look, you have a problem that the socialist movement emerged at a low point of the workers' movement, but you had 100 years of the workers' movement first, and all kinds of nascent institutions that fought together and apart and had various goals, but they came together that built the groundwork for the Unity Congress and the SPD. And even then, that was only in one fucking country.
Yeah,
right.
That's true,
So
it's like the idea of the Workers' Party emerges organically from the workers' movement, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that recreating the situation where a Workers' Party is going to emerge from a workers' movement again is that's a great idea, but how do you do that? And
go ahead.
And the only thing that I could come up with as a way to do that is to rebuild the workers' movement. And where does that start? That starts with, I guess, organizing your workplace, right? And that's a bit steep hill to climb at this point. And I don't know if we have the political conditions to do that. We're such an alienated and sort of, our subjectivity is so isolated from one another. We don't have the vision of a collective future that we used to, or any collective relationships between peoples anymore.
Yeah,
anymore.
There's a lot of stuff, but the one place I don't think you do start is assuming that that's all been figured out, and that what is necessary is a plan for whenever we are 50 steps away from where we are right now.
Right. Which would be the sectarian idea, the sectarian Trotskyist tradition that we came out of.
Yeah. Or how the RCP, they already have a draft constitution for the new republic. It's
I think the PSL might have something like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that is just insane. That's exactly how you make sure that nobody will ever take you seriously.
And that's where my pessimism kicks in. Is like,
yeah, exactly.
I don't see a way through this that isn't like. I mean, I'm not an accelerationist, but by any means, but I don't see a way through what's going on without something resembling collapse.
Yeah,
I would like for there to be another way, but I don't know how.
And yeah, I don't think collapse even gets you there. I mean,
it's not inevitable. No. Yeah.
I mean, Chris, you just basically. When did you become a communizer?
Well, there's no single fixed point. You became a communizer in the same way that that time works. It's like because it's happened now. This happened right now, and if you think about it in that way, yeah, sure, it happened right now. But really, it kind of already happened before, and it kind of came to fruition now.
Am I a communizer, or am I an anarchist, or am I a nihilist communist?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the nihilist communist guy denounced me on Twitter for being a right winger, but he's given up on nihilist communism. There's two guys. Monsieur Dupont was two people, and they apparently hate each other.
And honestly, and that's the thing that I would like to make it perfectly clear to everyone who listens to anything that I ever have to say is I am admitting freely, constantly, that I don't know what I think about a lot of things.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm not offering plans, schematics or anything. I have no idea what I think about a lot of stuff.
So I had this horrifying realization going through the Bureau of Labor Statistics for numbers for 2023 in a live stream, and it never occurred to me before. But we complain about how the labor movement can't, Benjamin Studebaker pointed out that Bernieites were actually strongest in the places that voted for Hillary Clinton. That's where they were structurally the strongest, and they could not overcome the Clintonite dominance of those political machines, right? That's New York, California, the upper Midwest, etc. That's where they were. I made a realization about unions too. And not only are unions not growing, they're not, by the way. Like all that growth talk, there's no evidence for it in the numbers.
No,
it was all speculative. There was an exciting possibility, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Slight slowing of decline.
Yeah. Right.
But not growth.
Yeah. So basically in 2021, there was an uptick after there was growth between 2012 and 2016. Interestingly. Not much. I mean, we're talking about like 1%. There was a massive decline post-COVID. There was an uptick in 2021, but then immediately dropped down to pre-COVID levels, and this year was the same. So what I was pointing out that like even with the UAW being all aggressive and everything, they're running a wed cream game. They're just doing more and more stuff to stay at the same place.
Right.
Private sector unionization, however, this is what I realized. Guess where it's all at? New York and California.
Yeah, that's not even a big surprise.
It's New York. The highest union density is New York and Hawaii. Hawaii's got the most, but that's because it's federal workers mostly, and they're mostly unionized.
Yeah.
And then now I'm going to say this: 17% of the entire workforce in the United States is in New York and California. They're big states, but when you think about what you need to like rejigger the labor movement to start taking over federal power, you're concentrated in places where you already have power. You're not building new power with that. And that's what people do not understand. And then let's talk about the nature of alienation. We talk about this in abstract terms. Let me talk in very like specific, real terms. What is the most common profession that a person can have if they're not college educated?
The service industry?
Trucking. Trucking, by the way, is inherently I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but like I do think truckers are workers. That's not my point. At least if they're not petit bourgeois, and about half of them are. But
yeah, a lot of them are independent contractors that own their own rigs.
Yeah. Right. But the ones that aren't are employees. They're workers. My point is, though, there is hardly a more alienated form of labor on the planet. You're in a car driving alone well, not a car, you're in a giant truck, driving alone, 6 days a week.
And you even sleep in there.
Right. You're not even embedded in a community, much less a workforce. Okay, there's that one. Next thing down, there was a petite bourgeoisification of the U.S. economy during neoliberalism, and I think we underestimate this. What do I mean by that? Everything became fucking franchises.
Yeah.
You know how hard it is to unionize a franchise shop?
It's damn near impossible. That's been the real lesson that I think very few people have learned from the Starbucks union campaign.
Right. But Starbucks is not franchise, but like they're just shop sites, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you get a franchise shop, you can't do it. You can't. They're dying on unionizing a corporate owned shops where there's individual owners, but they're not franchised out. They're still kind of technically corporate owned, and they can't. You're dealing with like contracts of 16. You start dealing with franchises where you don't even have a corporation really to deal with.
Yeah,
right. That's the reason why
you've got to unionize every single individual franchise.
Yeah, that's the reason for the IWW's brief resurgence several years ago. Because of how many shops regular unions wouldn't even touch, because it's a waste of time.
We had an active Austin IWW in Austin back in the day, and there was like drives to unionize co-op grocery stores and locally owned businesses and stuff like that. But that all died out after about 4 or 5 years of like frantic activity.
Yeah.
The service sector is only like 1.7% unionized.
Yeah.
Like, the industrial worker, by the way, also is only like 15% of the population if you include logistics and management and tech.
Right.
That's about as big as like the agricultural.
Yeah, it
worker.
is.
Yeah.
Well, I think agricultural workers are like 3%. So
is it?
Yeah. Agricultural workers are historically they were like 15%. Now it's like 3%.
I was thinking 12% for some reason, but yeah, I mean that's probably right.
I think if you look at agricultural dependent services, you probably get there, but that includes like grocery stores and shit.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot different.
Right.
And I know sometimes agricultural worker statistics include like fishermen as well.
Right.
Which, yeah.
And also in forestry.
Fishing,
farming, and forestry is all one category.
Is it?
Well, okay. It is often one category.
Yeah.
And also, we don't have good data for anything before 1983.
Yeah.
Because the Bureau of Labor Statistics didn't really keep it.
Yeah, before that, we just have the memory of the vague notion that it was big, and we don't even know how big.
Yeah.
We know what the organization's record says they have if they were public, but like...
Yeah.
So reviving the Farmer Labor Party is probably out then, huh?
Well, this is the thing. Like when people are like, "Oh, let's revive populism," I'm like, "Where are your sharecroppers? What's your class base?"
Yeah.
Yeah, like honestly, the Farmer Labor Party was already kind of based on a dying idea in the 20s, and by the depression for sure, it's over.
My great grandpa was a cotton sharecropper. I wonder.
He was also a populist.
Was he a populist?
He was, because he was in Williamson County, and during the years, whenever they were when the family lived there, every household in the entire county was registered as populist. He was, I don't know how active he was, but he was at least, as a voter, he was at least aligned toward the populist. And I like that a lot.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was actually weird. When I grew up, there was my grandfather was a bricklayer, and he was a New Dealer. But the only anti-New Dealer in my broad family was my Irish Catholic grandmother, who was an anti-racist activist and hated Roosevelt for siding with the Klan.
That's a decent reason, actually.
Yeah.
That populist background is, I think, a big part of why they moved down where they moved, and they bought into the land trust. They became cooperative farmers because of the populist precursor period or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was a immigrant. So yeah. I don't even know when he became a citizen, but back then it was a whole hell of a lot easier to get citizenship.
Yeah, because he had to get here.
He got here before 1921 when they those quotas were put into effect. He got here like just under the wire, basically.
Yeah.
All right, so I mean, I guess this leaves us in kind of a lurch because one of the interesting things that I've pointed out for a while, and I think it's led to all this PMC discussion, and people know how much I hate it, but there's some truth to parts of it. But the wage relations are damn near universalized. Like, it's like 80% of the population has some form of wage relation. Like,
right.
Which means that the basic relation of how you get your income looks like a proletarian relation. But the relationship to work varies dramatically. And unfortunately, the only people I saw really try to deal with this seriously was like the Eric Olin Wright analytic Marxist. And then, you know, problem with Eric Olin Wright is he doesn't believe in labor theory of value, and like thus kind of undermines the entire claim of exploitation that he's basing his class categories on. Like, it doesn't, like, I don't know what he thinks exploitation is. All right. Now, that's an intellectual problem, but it seems like something that we just immediately gave up. So instead of trying to really map out this terrain, what the left did in response to largely the Bernie campaign was to resurrect ideas from the 1970s. I mean, specifically from the failure of the New Left. That's where the Aaron Reich PMC thesis came from.
Yeah.
And Gouldner, etc., and to divide themselves based off of whether or not you thought that your office workers that you probably knew were annoying or not. Never mind that, like, most of the key communist figures in leadership outside of the DSA, they're literal millionaires. So I'm not going to name too many names here, but like, if you look at leaders of parties and whatnot and look up their net worth.
Yeah.
So what do we do with that? Like, how are we at a time period where people are coming to me in despair, but also getting angry with me for being honest with them? When you start speaking really honestly about the conditions on the ground, people cannot and do not want to hear it. Like AOC's betrayal, I put it in quotation marks because I'm like, that's the most predictable thing ever.
Is it a betrayal if she was never really on our side to begin with?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think I put betrayal in quotation marks for a reason. Our Cori Bush, who's just going to be primary to oblivion, down 22 points.
That bad, huh? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. The social democratic movement was basically the useful idiot for keeping the center of the Democrats around, and they're being organically disposed of in their unpopularity. And what I mean by that is, like, everyone knows that they weren't really that serious about what they were promising. They couldn't be. They never had the power to do that.
Also, even what they were promising, if you're very serious about it, it's actually less than a social democratic program, because those were hopes that were foisted upon them from the outside.
Right.
Their actual promises were just to be progressive and a voice for the common people. And even that is a false promise. But beyond that, all the rest of the hopes, those were just projections from below.
The progressive Democrats' version of that the DSAers were willing to fight for was like the Green New Deal, right?
Yeah. The Green New Deal, Medicare for all.
Yeah. Which the Green New Deal is just so inadequate. It's like, why even do it?
And also, I haven't heard those words in a very, 2 years?
It's because it was a non-starter that the establishment Democrats were 100% never going to go along with.
Right.
Getting something like the Green New Deal passed using the Democratic Party as the vehicle was never going to happen. And even then it was totally inadequate.
I mean, to be fair to the left for a second, though, I want to talk about the right, because they did the same shit. Like the right's making all these promises right now, and they're actually enacting. Well, this is one way in which they're different than the left. They're enacting reforms on the state level. Actually, no, the left did some of that too. They only do it in opposition to the president, though. Right. The moment there's a Republican president, I bet you a lot of the worst shit we see at the state level calms down a bit. It's not going to get reversed, right? But I bet you it slows down. There's less of a need for stunts, right?
Like the border stunt that's going on in Texas right now,
right?
Yeah.
It's an election
or like
year.
How much worse things got for trans people at the state level as soon as Biden was in office. Actually, that's another example of that.
Yeah.
It seems like in America, and to pick up a Matt Chrisman, that nothing happens except for negative partisanship, unless it goes to the fucking military.
Right. Yeah, it's like what motivates people to pass policies, to vote for initiatives, to get out and knock on doors is spiting your enemies.
It's spite and fear.
Yeah.
Which is a very bad way to grow a positive political. I mean, it's a very good way to get people politically activated, but it's a terrible way to have a political subject.
Yeah.
Because it's really inconsistent.
Which is perfect for mainstream partisan politics.
Mm-hmm. Well, basically, it's interesting. I was thinking about, I recently read Alex Hochili's review of the Vincent Bevins book, and the Anton Yeager and Borriello book and the Chris Catrone book, which are all postmortems for the millennial left, right?
Yeah.
And again, if we're writing postmortems for the millennial left, why are people calling me a pessimist? But I mean, I am. But like as an insult.
Why are people mad?
I was telling you that. Yeah, I was telling you guys that this was not going to work. 15 years ago. You guys can vouch. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I think you can vouch for that because you actually one of you actually like listened to everything I ever said and put it in a master document. So.
Oh yeah, one of us in the ISO back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have any idea who you were. I knew that North Star were some people that we were supposed to hate, but
I didn't write the ISO hit piece, unfortunately.
That was
Fam Bing.
There we go.
Yeah, that was like the persona non grata, like number one.
Yeah.
Yeah. After that, like their ISO members who would like comb my blog for typos. Like it's like they got real petty.
That's I mean, give a liberal an internet connection, he's gonna find a reason to cancel you.
That was the weirdest thing about the ISO though, because like one, a lot of them just became Marxist-Leninists as soon as they were out, and I'm like, well, okay, that doesn't make any sense. And the others have become just kind of liberals.
Yeah,
which makes more sense.
Yes, it does. With the liberal tailism, I mean that it would be a very easy transition.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see what has happened now because, my point about the millionaires, that's a slight point, but it is kind of an important one. The reason why I point it out is that's why those organizations are surviving is because they have leadership patronage a lot of the time. The money problem, the idea that there's no money on the left is not true. The idea that the money's coming up organically, though, that's not happening. And if people are willing to spend stuff on the left, they're not willing to spend it even on the DSA. They're willing to spend it on podcasts, which, by the way, keep giving me money. But like,
hey, we need a patron.
Yeah, and give Regrettable Century money. You guys aren't even that expensive.
No, man, $2. That's it. I mean,
yeah,
you get what you pay for, but
yeah, still it's $2. But my point is like it becomes a consumer politics, right? Like it becomes an identity in the consumer identity vein, which I think broadly speaking fits partisan politics today in general.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you don't have to give up anything to be a Republican or a Democrat. Like you just put a D on a registration card. Like it doesn't even cost you money. So
I mean, even that is actually doing work. A lot of people don't actually even register as anything. They just become either a Democrat or Republican because of what their personal kind of a, what's a good word? Affectation, what they present as. And that's it.
This leads us to a certain kind of like problem of American politics today. For example, the stereotype that liberals were college educated and conservatives were not has been a stereotype my entire life. It's actually true now.
Yeah,
it wasn't
didn't
true
used to be.
most of my life. Like
right.
Like when we were in our in undergrad, you know, I mean, you would constantly hear conservatives harping on about the liberalism of higher education. And I was like, where are these liberals? Like all of my professors, like rabid right wingers, you know?
Yeah.
But now it's true.
Right.
All my right-wing professors in philosophy and English left. All of them.
Yeah.
All of them. They all retired early.
Like there were a couple of professors in my undergraduate in the history department that are still there, that were right wingers, but most of them have either died or retired.
Yeah. And people are like, oh, well, that's a good sign. I'm like, no, it's kind of not. Because in one sense, it does indicate that like the conservative theory going back to William Buckley. I mean, and when William Buckley was saying this was absolutely not true. That liberal education was like a sneaky left-wing conspiracy theory full of communists.
Right.
Like there were a lot of communists. The Communist Party, you know, that recruiting of millionaires and stuff, that was a Communist Party in the 40s Popular Front thing. It was.
Right. But Buckley was saying that in the 60s.
Right. But those people were gone by the 60s. They were largely marginalized in the 50s. Are they betrayed? I mean, like,
well, yeah. Buckley's talking
like
about
9/10 of them.
Buckley is falsely calling New Deal liberals communists.
Right.
And that's because he went to Yale with a bunch of people that were New Deal liberals. I mean, that just kind of puts the lie to what he's talking about, because a lot of the people that he went to Yale with ended up being in the State Department, Yale and Harvard, right?
Ended up being in the State Department for Eisenhower.
Exactly, for Eisenhower and Nixon, right? Yeah, but Buckley was part of that group of right-wingers in the 50s that was attempting to pull the Republican Party away from the moderate conservatism, quote unquote, of Eisenhower. You know, he didn't want to touch Social Security. He didn't want to touch the New Deal. You know,
but it but also as a buffer against the Birchers. And by the way, known CIA asset, Buckley.
Right. Yeah. Known CIA asset and closeted homosexual Buckley.
Right. Like, I mean, God, I remember watching Gore Vidal with utter contempt, like basically imply that. Anyway, the joys of our childhood.
Gore Vidal is awesome.
But that stereotype is now true. All right.
Absolutely.
Working class liberalism has more or less died. There have been people who tried to argue that that's a problem for the Democrats. But I hate to tell you, working class people, even in eras of mass enfranchisement, what I mean by right now, since Obama, you had a reversal of the general trend from the 80s forward of fewer and fewer people voting in elections.
Yeah.
That got reversed. But still, the working class does not vote very much. And I predict that the next election is going to go back to the 90s norms.
Absolutely. There's going to be an enormous enthusiasm gap. That's going to make it look like back when everyone hated the government and didn't want to vote.
Mm-hmm. And so, why am I pessimistic? Well, it seems like we're back. Like, if you look at the left today, and the left in 2007, it seems like we're back in 2007. Except now, some of the people that were on our side in 2007 are on the right, on the new anti-imperial right train.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
So what did the electoral turn and the Graeberite turn and all that actually do? And it seems like blow smoke up people's ass for a decade and a half. And now that's ending and it's over and they're feeling despair. And where I'm like, if you'd have had a little bit of hard-nosed pessimism, you wouldn't be despairing right now.
Right. Like from 2008 to 2016 or whatever was basically the 90s. And now we're just back to the early aughts again.
Aughts. Except that we got to the aughts through this weird circuitous period of pretending we were in the 1960s again too.
Right.
Like because the new left was broadly speaking a social democratic left. Like
sure, yeah.
You know, the new but like you saw all the same things emerge. I'm writing an article right now. So Occupy, okay, what happened with Occupy? After you started getting these weird ultra left tendencies coming back up, like you know, the resurrection of Bordigism, the resurrection of cancelism, the resurrection of situationism, although that didn't last very long. And then communization theory was super popular, right?
I remember when everybody was a communizer for like a hot 15 minutes.
Even I went through that phase. It happens. I'll admit it.
I think when that was happening, I was just becoming a post-Trotskyist from being a Trotskyist.
I was coming out of Platypus Affiliated Society, and the endnotes speech at a Platypus plenary was really impressive. So I actually kind of thought that they were going to be a way out. But immediately, I mean, like we're talking 2015, I was already thinking about writing an essay called 13 Ways to Explain a Lack of Working Class Revolution, which is admittedly a play on Wallace Stevens, where I went through the various theories of why there is no working class revolution, the left-com theories, decadence, which I believe in, actually. I'm a decadence theorist, but decadence, regression, third worldism, the various forms of third worldism, labor theory of value negating third worldism, non-labor theory of value negating third worldism, overdevelopmentalism, there's a bunch, like reactionary worker consciousness, new revolutionary subject students, new revolutionary subject people of color. And by the way, most Marxist humanists, even though they say that they don't actually see that Marxist humanists with a hyphen, even though they say that they're not identitarians, they believe the advanced part of the proletariat are people of color innately.
Yeah.
And so they end up being that way anyway, which explains why so many of them became just Democrats. Like, what was this weird tendency where you had anti-Stalinist and CPUSA Stalinists both having the same position in the Democratic Party around Bernie in 2016?
Yeah.
Like,
I'll admit I got caught up in the Bernie moment too, but never because I thought that Bernie was going to institute democratic socialism.
I kind of had hoped that it would spark some new way to start figuring things out.
Yeah.
And it didn't instead.
And instead it kind of pushed the stat made strong a bunch of people to the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Which in retrospect, upon reflection, maybe that was obvious.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was not obvious to me anyways.
It
was obvious as a possibility, but it was not obvious as a, it wasn't like guaranteed. It wasn't even highly like it was only possible.
Right. And and we were never like hardcore Bernie partisans. Like, I mean, Jason, you might have been. I definitely wasn't. I just saw it as like, hey, look, a possibility of some sort of rupture. Let's fucking exploit it. Let's go for it, you know?
I mean, that's the way I saw it as a hardcore Bernie partisan. Like I knocked on doors and I, whatever. But I was like a part of volunteer for the campaign twice, both campaigns for the same reason, but not because I actually believed that it might work, but because I hoped that all of that energy would go somewhere. And it did go somewhere, just only in the one direction that I definitely didn't want it to go.
Well, I think
so that's on me, that's my bad.
I think it's interesting to look at from hindsight because I was not part of the initial Bernie phenomenon, but that was partly geography. I was in Egypt. Like I couldn't have been really. And I was following the rise and fall of Syriza, the rise and fall of Podemos, and the rise and fall of Corbynism.
Yeah.
And the movement of people like Mark Fisher from kind of quasi-ultra-left positions into basic fucking social democrats, which you even saw with people like David Graeber, even though he wouldn't admit it. Yeah, fuck, you see it with Chomsky. Like Chomsky making it sound like Corbyn was defeated by a conspiracy is embarrassing. And which, by the way, Chomsky does. He goes on shows, talks about it today. So when I came back to the States, I was really jaundiced on this new populism stuff, and I was like, "Oh, you guys are late to the game, just like you guys are late to the game to this right-wing populism that we're seeing with Trump. Like, this has already been happening everywhere else that I've been for like 3-4 years, and it did not look promising." But everyone I knew, including hardcore communists in Europe, were like Corbynism. And
yeah.
And I remember feeling like, dude, if this fails, the British left is going to be liquidated. It's just not going to exist anymore. It's going to be like in the 1970s with the new communist movement or the new left, where they just walk out into their personal lives and pretend they never did that. And also there's no real organized left in Britain anymore. That's exactly what happened. And the other thing that has sort of thrown me for a loop is like this fetishization of European protest movements. Like, oh, we'd be out in the streets like in France. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. There's riots in France every 4 years. But Macron hasn't had his agenda really stopped, has he?
No, not at all. In fact, I have it on pretty good authority that it doesn't matter that there are protests. There are protests all the time. It doesn't matter. I mean, I knew that anyways, but just in case I was maybe wrong, I have checked, and I'm not wrong.
Well, this is the thing from the Vincent Bevins books is actually really good. He documents like we have more protests everywhere in the world because like the entire world was pulling from this. And to go back to my Gen X left thing, what was the left book that was on the bestseller list? It still blows my mind that it was on the New York Times bestseller list in 1999. Do you guys remember?
No.
Hart and Aguirre's Empire.
Was it? Yeah.
Yes.
That makes sense.
It was on the New York Times bestseller list.
Wow. I don't think I knew that.
So, in a way, both the, and I think there, I don't want to say this is just us who's kind of just, Anton Yeager and Alex Ochili have also kind of came to this conclusion. That kind of inchoate anarchism and the inchoate social democracy, one is the unorganized, spontaneous form, one is the kind of quasi-horizontal, almost Bonapartist, verticalist form.
Yeah.
Right. But they ended up being the same fucking thing. Which in almost all cases, and this is where I want to point out, this is not just an American phenomenon, right? It's easy to handle in the United States. The left is deader in Britain than it is in the US, like from everything I can tell.
Yeah. Well, for sheer lack of news, like because it used to be in the aughts, right? You looked at the British left to figure out what the American left was about to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, you remember me saying the most progressive thing about the aught teens was that we finally gave up on our fetish on the British left.
Yeah.
Like, but now I mean,
it wasn't very long ago that it wasn't even just that we watched the British left. We actually literally took our marching orders at one point from the British left. Yeah. And then even after that, we took our cues. Unofficially.
Because
when we say we, you mean Trots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
American Trotskyism more or less died in the 1980s and was resurrected by British influential groups in the mid 1990s, like the Cliffites, because I was like, why is it all this weird? Why are all the Trot groups here British Trot groups? We have an organic Trotskyist tradition, and well, the organic Trotskyist tradition liquidated itself in the 80s for the most part.
Yeah,
right.
With the sole exception of.
Go ahead.
I say with the sole exception of the SWP, which just made itself completely unrelatable to everyone.
The Sparts, the SWP, and then the Marxites who just became Stalinists.
And then some minor groups like the Socialist Action and some other
the League for the Revolutionary Party.
Yeah, spin-offs from the SWP.
Well, weren't they a post-Spart group, the LRP?
Yeah, I think they're like...
Yeah, the LRPs are.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to whatever exists now, what has existed since basically the 80s was the ISO and the IMT and Socialist Alternative, all three of which were literally started by people who physically moved here from Britain.
Yeah. Do you know that once the ISO split from the SWP, that there was a group in New York that stayed affiliated to the SWP and tried to start a competing organization against the ISO?
I remember when at one point they had like 20 people and they were like, "We've doubled in size."
Badass, dude.
Yeah.
Cliffite splits, dude. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that stuff was funny.
It's depressing, dude. It's depressing to think I spent so much time in that tendency.
Yeah. I actually can't decide what's more depressing. The Bernie moment, which I was already with my very low expectations. The Syriza moment, where I was actually in Athens campaigning for Syriza and they won, and then they still, whatever.
Yeah, you and I would have, if we didn't know each other back then, we'd have been in different sides of that. Because I was like, I was saying Syriza was going to fail from moment one.
Well, you were there. Right. You were there during the vote to default, right?
Yeah, I was there campaigning for the no vote, and we like overwhelmingly won that vote, and it didn't matter.
The funny, it didn't matter. The funny thing is, at the time, I was like, if they do that, the Greek economy will collapse until it reestablishes itself. Like they don't have the productive capacity to like float an MMT style currency, right?
Right.
That I was arguing that with MMTers at the time. But the funny thing is now is I'm like, well, they might as well have done it because they got fucked by the Troika so bad anyway that it ended up the same. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
And at least they would have had some goddamn dignity. Like,
yeah, there were some on the margins. There was some speculation from within the party, within Syriza, including people who were in parliament, about what it would take to be basically Cubify, to become the Cuba of Europe. And they weren't very popular, but their ideas were known. And it doesn't really matter because nobody listened to them. Anyways, I don't know what's more depressing, those two things or what happened with the ISO and how much of my own life, basically, I don't know, 12, 13 years of my life. So, yeah.
Well, your sectarian formation died. My sectarian formation is becoming popular again, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's worse.
Yeah, platypus is very interesting. It's interesting that platypus is growing, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand why.
Because a lot of people are burnt out on the left. I mean, they got used by, but I mean, that's how platypus grows.
Yeah,
is they have an answer for that.
Like I will even go as far as to say that I think that platypus was right, but it doesn't matter because you shouldn't join platypus.
If platypus is right about some things, some things.
If Catrone had gotten his attempt to revive the Socialist Party in the United States off as well as platypus, which was something they were trying to do before Bernie, I actually would have given him props because that's what he wanted. He, like me, thought that like anything we had to do had to be independent. So for people who think Catrone's just a Republican, that's not true.
No, not at all. I mean, I think that they go a little bit. The thing about platypus that's always made me want to stay away from them is their positions on Trump, right? Like, as funny as it is that Trump is going to win again, it's not good. It's not good at all.
I have a broader disagreement with them about the nature of liberalism, which they see as like, I've never thought that the dialectic of liberalism is as clean as they think.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's where that, they've always found me too anti-liberal. And you know what? I kind of am. But so, a lot of people find me too anti-liberal. I mean, like, that's the thing.
Don't.
I know you don't.
You're more liberal than me. And I don't mean you're more liberal than me. You're less critical of liberalism than me.
Yeah, well, I don't
think you're a liberal.
Yeah, well, I think liberalism has done good things, but like,
sure,
its time has been over for a fucking century.
Yes, it has.
Yes, it has.
I mean, maybe longer.
But for me, like, and even then, it's not uncomplicated, and so, the reason why I kind of adopted one. A lot of people who are optimistic are actually pessimistic too. Like, if you read Graeber's book, Fragments of an Anarchist Anthropology, which seems super optimistic, he actually basically argues that there's no such thing as categorical difference between human time periods, which to me is a very conservative position.
Yeah.
Like,
it's also just absurd.
Yeah.
Well, I will defend him a little bit. And like, he's arguing like people's basic mental structures haven't changed since, he doesn't like the term hunter-gatherers, but that's basically what he was arguing. And I agree with that. But it's like, I'm like, but the scale of things actually does eventually change the nature of things. Like, you can argue that that nationality is a kind of symbolic kinship, but the scale of nationality makes it a completely different thing than most other forms of symbolic kinship.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's one of many different examples of why I can't understand how anybody can think of anything as being other than dialectical, because I can't think in another way anymore.
Well, my critique about, like, I know people say I overfocus on authority, but I do it because MarxistLeninism love that book. Well, not a book; it's really 3-page pamphlet, but
that's considerably less than a book.
Yeah. And it's Engels at his most undialectical because he's purely Whiggish in that.
Yeah.
He like can't see how the centralization of production will eventually actually divide up production in a way that would re-alienate. He literally does not seem to be able to conceive that in that text. And I'm like, Marx saw it. Marx did see it. But Kautsky didn't see it. Kautsky seemed to think that like industrial production was gonna like infinitely increase the education of the worker forever.
Yeah.
I mean, there's in one sense there's too much made of the differences between Marx and Engels, but in that sense, it's very much the case that the difference is huge, because Kautsky and everybody that came after him, they vulgarize Engels's vulgarization of what we would call Marxism today.
I don't actually think Engels is actually guilty of that in every text either. Like, the dialectics of nature, think is a text that, like, other than me disagreeing about the thumb, I think is actually a kind of brilliant text. Like,
I mean, like, it's he touches on a whole lot of stuff. Even if he's not entirely correct, he's at least making a very valorous attempt that very few have made.
One of the things that I think gives me pause, though, I mean, because when we look at the predictions of the 20th century, to kind of tie this back, because we've gone through our personal journeys here, but mid 20th century, you have a crisis in Marxism, really. Yeah. You do. Mm-hmm. People like to pretend it was just a Western crisis, but no, it was not, because like you have Soviet Marxism looks to be dominating, and it starts to slow down its dominance because basically, from the standpoint of today, we can see what they did. They industrialized what took the West 200 years. They piggybacked off of it and did it in 20.
Yeah.
At high cost, at high cost of life, even. But they did it, right?
And effectively broke the famine cycle for the first time in Russia's history, for the history of the Russian Empire and its lands. So like the human cost was enormous, but they hadn't had a famine since the end of World War II.
Right. Even if they didn't always have plenty. I mean, like, we also need to no, they were not always doing as well as the West. We'll talk about that in a minute. They also bore
the founding of the Fourth. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
I was just going to say the founding of the Fourth International is indicative of a profound crisis of Marxism.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Because the First and the Second International were founded on the basis of the strength of the workers' movement. And by the Fourth, they were just like, well, history is going to guarantee that the proletariat is going to come to power and its leadership is going to lead. So all we have to do is make sure its leadership is organized and the rest of it will do itself. By the time the Fourth International is established, Marxism already kind of doesn't really exist anymore. It's at least on very shaky grounds.
And part of that, probably the problem with that is, or that part of what leads to that problem is a faulty decadence theory that Trotskyists adhere to.
Well, it's more beyond a decadence theory. It was a crisis theory.
Yeah.
I want to walk back a little bit. I don't want to say that Marxism didn't exist because I don't want to be like, oh, I get it and nobody else at all ever has. But I guess all I really want to say is that like that proposition is based on a very faulty assumption and a very bad reading of what is foundational to essentially what is supposed to be the entire basis of the project itself.
Well, you have the fight the fight very quickly in the 1950s and 60s becomes actually so multifarious it's hard to keep up with. So, we talk about the failure of the communists and the social democrats to come back, but by the time you're in the 60s, you have Maoism as a form of Marxist-Leninism, Hojaism as a form of Marxist-Leninism. And by the way, Maoism is about to split into 3 different forms.
Yeah.
By the end of the 1970s, there's like 5 radically different kinds of Maoism. Like Trotskyism is beginning to fracture immediately.
Well, Trotskyism begins to fracture in the 30s.
Right.
Yeah.
But the fractures really start mattering in the 50s.
Sure. Yeah.
40s. Okay.
30s, 40s.
The Comintern, the priorly Comintern aligned left is going to split between conservativist, Marxist-Leninist, humanist, Khrushchevian parties, Eurocommunism, a resurgent form of left communism, Trotskyism, Maoism. Need I go on?
Yeah.
And then in the American tradition, you also had prior forms of non-Marxist socialism coming back.
Right. There's a resurgence of the Socialist Party of America in the 1960s, 50s, and 60s.
For a little while.
Yeah, and the SPA, it's kind of Marxist, but not really. Historically speaking, it's proto-Marxist. It kind of doesn't help that the best Marxist we had in the United States prior to Debs was Daniel De Leon, who was a sectarian weirdo, but also probably one of the smartest Marxists in existence. So it's one of those.
Yeah.
It's funny watching him condemn the SPD as being too bourgeois in 1912 or something.
The problem is, of course, that everybody was too bourgeois. So, if everybody's too bourgeois, then who do you work with? And that's actually De Leon's problem.
Yeah, the interesting thing about De Leon, though, is De Leon actually does think that the bourgeois revolution is a good thing. He just thinks that the socialists shouldn't muck it up by trying to do the 2 things at once.
He's not even wrong.
He's like, it's going to confuse the grounds. How are we going to argue for socialism if we're also doing the bourgeois revolution? Which, if you think that's bad in the SPD form, because, he's talking about, the battles against Bismarck, really.
Right.
In the Kaiserreich, imagine how bad it's going to be in the Lenin form for Daniel De Leon. Because then you're not even dealing with a bourgeois formation at all, as far as he's concerned. In fact, in some weird way, De Leon's like out Plekhanov being Plekhanov. All right. So, of course, I'm pessimistic when you look at this. The other thing that I'm pessimistic about, this is a broader sense, and we can maybe turn this around, is I think socialists promise too fucking much. We are not promising everyone's going to be happy. We are not
anyways.
We're not promising a life without any labor. I think we are promising a life without unnecessary labor, right? But we're not promising a life without work.
Well, some people are, but they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing about like anti-work, like the anti-work communism. I kind of got it when you were talking about it as like alienated labor forms. But if you're talking about it like as no work at all, and we can just have robots do it, that's silly.
Yeah, it's absurd.
And for the people who are insisting that we make anti-work part of how we appeal to non-socialists, that to me is just insane.
I mean, it's the ultimate symbol. It's the ultimate evidence of the utterly non-proletarian character of a certain section of the left, because anti-work does not appeal to anybody who works.
No,
it just doesn't. Because people who work, they're proud of it because they should be, and they know they should be, even if everything else about whatever they think is utterly reactionary and reprehensible. There's something there's something foundational about the fact that they perform some necessary service to the world and that they find some meaning in it. And they should.
Being unable to conceive of a work that is disalienated and not for the profit of some owner somewhere, to me is just betrays a lack of imagination, of a utopian imagination, which is part of the problem with the left in general, I think, is we don't actually have a utopian imagination anymore.
No, we don't. And which is weird that the pessimists are the people who are arguing that we don't have a utopian imagination anymore. But
that's why we're pessimistic.
Right.
One of the reasons, anyway.
But I do think we promise too much. There's other things I think we like. One tendency that you guys and I have talked about privately, and I'm not going into specifics here because I don't want to pick a fight with the entire fucking world. But like,
but just everyone should just know that in secret we definitely already have it out for you.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't stand the attempt to ennoble capitalist-based social destructive tendencies that are literally shortening people's lives.
Yeah.
As a good thing. Like, now that does not mean that I'm a believer in like the bourgeois traditional family or anything like that. I'm not at all, actually. But I'm probably the least believer in that of the three of us. But like, financial based divorce fucking sucks. Like, and it's a big cause of divorce. It's also a big cause of why a lot of proletarian women don't get married ever, right? Because they can't afford to divorce anyway. Like, I often feel like, particularly with the lack of focus on children and social reproduction, and I mean this in a broad sense, like that we've kind of ceded all that to conservatives or to a certain kind of feminist.
Yeah.
Ironically, like it's either all on this end or all over here. But I'm like, if you don't have provisions for children, you literally don't have a fucking future. Like, you don't. And there are provisions for protecting existing children, and I'm not, but there's not a whole lot of talk about like what would be a socialist way to handle children. I think we're afraid to do that because of like the radicalness of like certain family abolition schemes that have not worked in the past, such as even what they tried on the Cup of Team. We have not been talking about that at all. We have not been talking about people as having necessary relations to each other. The entire framework of the broad left right now is often atomized individual about an innate self that's not social. Like the only time we refer to social construction of self is as pathologies like race or whatever, but we don't deal with like the social construction of self in general. Which to me is this weird form of like the inability to like deal with the fact that the individual and the collective are like in dialogue with each other. You're not the collective. You're also not an alienated, atomized individual. You wouldn't even have a language if you were an alienated, atomized individual. Like other people teach you how to speak. They teach you like you don't survive it. Babies don't survive on their fucking own.
Nope. I got one of those things.
Yeah.
I'm very aware of how fragile they are.
They barely can hold their own heads up. Like,
yeah.
Hey, my baby's getting pretty good at that.
I think a major problem is just it's not just that we don't deal with these things. I don't think that we collectively in the broad sense of what, the left, I don't think we even are aware of the fact that we don't deal with these things. I don't think that there's a conception of these things as even existing and mattering at all.
Well, why do you think that is?
Well, my very simple, probably simplistic answer is a direct result of the liberalism that dominates the culture of the left, and that is a result of tailing and confusing our project with liberalism, which is, there's lots of stuff that's all downstream of, but the simple answer is that is the liberalism of the left, and it's actually that simple to me, anyways.
I would say it's because we relied on students as our base for so long, and that's what permeated our culture. And that, yes, that.
I mean, yeah, that's a branch of this. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I like that when we talk about liberalism, I like to think about the mechanisms in which like materially this manifests, right? Like,
right.
Why did we do that? Like, I always want to say it wasn't just out of like if we go back to what led the New Left to do that, it wasn't just out of like, oh, the workers are reactionary. Not initially. What you guys know what the original reasons were given for it, right? Well, the reactionary worker stuff came later, but
when it comes to the part of the left that we hail from, I'll just speaking for the ex Cliffite ISO part was
and post 1980s Trotskyists.
Yeah, in general, really for the post 1980s Trotskyist world, and really that is the left, really. But it's when it comes specifically to the ISO. At first, the social base of the organization was in the Teamsters Union. If you were in the ISO, you were in the Teamsters Union, or you were adjacent to it in some way. And part of the problem with that was that, you would lose like a couple of people because of some kind of difference in hiring or layoffs or something, and you would lose a big part of the organization's financial base. And the student world was just a more stable foundation financially, and that was literally it. The idea was always at some point that financial foundation would enable us to go back into the organized working class, and it just that attempt was just never made again.
Yeah, when I was reading the early 60s stuff on this, the idea was that the children of the proletarian were actually being shipped off to universities by people who got the GI Bill, and the GI students too. So that if you wanted to follow the proletarian, since they weren't going in the factories, you needed to follow them into this educational space that was priorly a very elite space. Now, this justification does feel a little diluted to me, because if you look at like the amount of the population that was going into the universities in the 60s, it's still like less than 20% of the population.
Yeah. That sounds like once it's already happened, you look back and you justify it in some way.
Yeah. But it's crazy to me now when you hear people like, oh, we need to only focus on the non-educated industrial working class. And I'm like, that's 15% of the population. And we need to exclude anyone with a college education. I'm like, that's 40% of the population.
Yeah. Well, we don't need numbers, do we?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that reality is not sunk in. There's a reason why there's been a broader permeation of educational culture. But here's the other thing: if the left relies on that, it's dead. I mean, one of the ironies of like the DeSantis long march to the institution is, one, they believe Gramsci, all this is about cultural hegemony and they can take over that way, which is funny.
Yeah.
And two, that they're doing it through dying institutions. If they weren't dying, they wouldn't be able to take them over. Like the universities are dying for other reasons than conservative hijinks. Like kids aren't going to them anymore.
Right. Because they used to be, you know, how you got a job, and now they're just an albatross around your neck for the rest of your fucking life while you work your job that you could have gotten if you didn't go to college.
Right. Yeah, honestly, like at least for me, probably the single biggest mistake I ever made was going to college. I mean, in terms of finances, anyways.
Oh yeah, financially, yeah. Going to college was a terrible decision on my part as well. Only thing college has ever helped me do was get into more colleges, and in that instance, I've been really good at it.
I mean, so you have this trend, and what you know, I'm going to talk about populations for a second, because population does actually affect this. During the high points of the younger end of the millennials, those universities were flush with students again, right? They were. Okay. The baby boom's kids were going, and you had all these new immigrant kids coming in for the first time, and all these new black families going to like community colleges for the first time and whatnot. So they're flush with people. All right. But that's reversing incredibly quickly, because the jobs for those kids really don't exist. Not in the way we were told. And there was a tendency in the 1990s to take jobs that used to just require a high school diploma and make them require a college degree. You see this insurance and whatnot. That's being reversed now because there's simply not enough people. Right? So that artificial barrier on application is being removed. So we look at that and go, well, if the left and liberals are totally dependent on this educational bias, they're fucked. Right? Because even if you're assuming growth here, economic growth, it's hard to see where it's going to come from with this new industrialization. And let's talk about this industrialization, though. It's not employing that many people. Like the United States I remember seeing people say in the aught teens, oh, we don't make anything.
Right.
That's not true.
Yeah.
It was never true. We're the second or third, depending on the year, most industrially productive economy. China beats us. Europe beats us sometimes. They're not beating us right now. And now we are totally integrated with North America. Like Mexico and Canada are super integrated into our economy.
Well, yeah, and like that doesn't correlate with number of people employed in productive fields.
Absolutely. Right. That's the point. Automation has changed that.
Yes.
Yeah, because the onshoring trend, officially the onshoring trend has been the main thing that's been discussed and reported on for like a decade at least now.
Mm-hmm.
The process of moving productive facilities back and moving them to the south, like the largest auto manufacturing plant is like in Tuscaloosa, Alabama or whatever. And a lot of people were hopeful that was going to mean something that it just doesn't mean.
Because there's still small employment sectors. Like I was trying to explain to that, like the UAW can be awesome, but graduate students and auto manufacturers in factories are not a huge part of the American working class.
Right.
Period.
Right.
End of discussion. Like
hasn't been since the 80s.
Right. So can we be honest here about the nature of the economy? And like I don't see anyone really trying to do that. Like like the left will flirt with it. You'll get a thing on Jacobin in a footnote once about the actual numbers, and like Ben Fong will mention it. But in general, people just ignore it and be like, "Oh, there's all this labor militancy." Really?
It's because they have to be optimistic about it. So it doesn't even matter if they know. They can't actually acknowledge it. They definitely can't talk about it. Because what is your optimism going to be based on? If your growth model is based upon, not changing any orientation, then you can't actually talk about why you need to change your orientation.
So this is why I think we have trouble organizing these days. On one hand, we tell everyone they're victims, and people don't like that. That's a different problem, but it's related. And on the other hand, we try to spin everything optimistically, where we're also like this general liberal pessimism has influenced all society, and yet also people are like, oh, but we're on the right side of history.
Yeah,
there is no right side of history. Like, not if you don't make it.
Right.
Yeah, like
and you don't make it just by wanting
history. A dialectical development of history doesn't automatically ensure anything. It's just that there will be developments. That's it.
Yeah.
So this gets us to, I guess, it's a long, almost 2-hour delay into like actually defining what revolutionary pessimism is for you guys. But this is why I think we needed it, because these trends for me are a long durée. I'm a downer. Like the thing about you guys showing up on you guys show, it was a breath of fresh air to me because somebody else sounded like me. But when I hear your positions in like 2012 and 2016, I was like, well, I was already pretty pessimistic by that point. So
we were just purging our trot hangover at that point.
Well, that's the power of ideology, because if I go back through, like, if I find old articles I read, old emails I sent, old things I wrote and I didn't publish, old Facebook posts even, I find all of the ingredients to my philosophy and my general outlook now. But I wasn't allowing myself to look at the whole picture.
Right.
So,
you weren't allowing yourself to draw the conclusions that should have been drawn by all of the thoughts that you had about everything.
Yeah. It was because I was in the ISO and I was, was part of the like leading upper echelons of the ISO. I would have individual positions on one or another aspect of things that it wasn't until I came back from Europe and I didn't come back to the ISO that I actually stepped away and started looking at the whole thing. And even then, it took, I don't know, about another year or so after that to actually acknowledge in full. So it's just been a very long process.
Yeah.
So what is revolutionary pessimism and how do you guys get to it? And then I'll talk about my views of pessimism. I guess I did mention that I have a darker view of like what we can promise. Like, I think we're going to still be working on like chauvinism after communism.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I think, I think gender relations are going to get a lot better, but they're still going to be fraught. I'm not promising that everything bad is going to be undone simply by getting rid of capitalism.
No.
In fact, if anything, that's when we can actually start to do something about those things.
Right.
Because everything that we do now just exacerbates it. We put a Band-Aid on something and it makes something else worse.
Right.
Worse.
Right.
Yeah. So what a revolutionary pessimism is for us isn't a pessimism about the prospects of revolution per se, though that might be part of it. Like in the conditions that exist right now, like our pessimism is a complete inability to see. It's a complete pessimism regarding anything positive coming out of the situation as it stands now. Our formations and organizations on the left that exist now, the structures of our state and government that exist, our international structures with other workers, the abilities of the workers' movement and in its current form. It's basically just complete lack of faith in anything progressing forward if things stay the way they are now, because we don't have any kind of infrastructure for moving forward. We don't have we don't have the movements. We don't have we don't have a workers' movement. We don't have mass politics to deal with crisis. We just need to see our way through the world as it exists right now in order to make things better. So our pessimism is like a complete and utter pessimism, but it's a dialectical pessimism because we see on the other side of all of this that there is hope. And I think it's actually a radical optimism in that we think things can get better and that we can transcend things the way they are now. But,
Right. And critical to that is that means that the answer is not to just make a new group and try to build it up on the basis of anything that has been done since, I don't know, since the end of the Second World War, but at least since the 60s. Yeah. So like that kind of pessimism, what that means is that finally, for me anyways, it means nothing that exists can, as it currently exists, can be the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'm similar, and there are some things that I would probably add to that. I would say that a philosophical pessimist has to take the reality of human suffering and its legitimacy as a given. What I mean by the legitimacy is not that not that you should suffer, is that you do, and that we should always be trying to mitigate that suffering. This is why it's not a conservative position for me. Like, I'm not saying that like we should just accept our lot stoically and just get kicked in the balls for all eternity.
Yeah, exactly.
But that any attempt to, when anyone's promising you we're gonna get rid of all of it, you probably shouldn't trust them. Right. Two, there are always unforeseen consequences and overcomplicated systems, and you're going to always have to deal with that. And that's going to require vigilance. So the other thing is like the post-revolutionary period doesn't end the situation. And in that sense, I'm a lot more like, I don't know, Trotskyist or something. Or because I'm like, the Marxist-Leninist conception is generally 3 stages of revolution. And I'm like, only 3? No, you can't have violent revolution all the time. Obviously, that would exhaust everything.
Yeah, and it has.
Yeah, and it has. But do you only think there's 3 stages of social change? Like, Marx is actually very vague about what he thinks is beyond, the first transitionary period on purpose, and we're going to have to deal with that. I guess that means, for example, when I hear answers like we need to be horizontalist instead of verticalist or verticalist instead of horizontalist, I'm automatically like already out. There's nothing inherent about a form of organization that's going to fix all of our problems. Right. There are forms of organization that'll fuck us up. Like I can't believe how weirdly dependent Trotskyist parties were on the Bolshevik formation based on the like post-Civil War Bolshevik party constitution, which is crazy to me that they insist on that forever.
Yeah, in some ways they still do.
Yeah, no, it's just faction bans, slate voting. It's like it's a terrible way to engender trust in your leadership, actually, and it's a way to make faction fights zero sum. Right,
and that's the reason why no group can even top 1,000 these days.
Right. I believe in political programs, but I think if you try to form a political program too early, you're basically trying to dictate people what they should do.
Right. Like a political program is an organic outgrowth of a movement. You don't make a political program in advance of a movement's existence.
Yeah, which I think puts us like this is a division between us and a lot of Marxists. It's because I'm like, yeah, we need a program, but you're trying to build one now. Like you're nowhere near there. Like, and you go ahead.
I was gonna say I think that like, unlike a lot of Marxists, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm pretty sure that I think I've gleaned this about you as well, is that we don't think that we need to have absolute ideological clarity order to
no, of course not. Yeah,
like clarity doing, if it ever comes at all.
Right. Yeah, I would agree.
But there, I mean, obviously, there will be there's some ideological points that are non-negotiable, right?
Sure.
But everything, that's one of the things one of the reasons why I eschew qualifiers on my Marxism is because I want whatever I am, whatever adjective that I attach onto my Marxism, to be determined by the reality of the times that we live in, and not by some tradition that I have decided to LARP on the internet.
Right.
Well,
this is my like big break with Bordigism. It's not even the anti-democratic aspect of it so much as just like the insistence on invariance.
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, no, like, like I actually think Kautsky's right that we can only speak about the truth of our time, because it's what we can know, and I think that leads me to just say, like, we have to come to terms with the fact that our left, the left that we came up with, the Gen X and millennial left, failed on its own conditions.
Right.
And that attempts to deny that or not deal with that or to like even go back to a prior form, like Marx, like old school, we're going to try to resurrect the Marxist-Leninism of the 20s or whatever. Or the 50s, depending on who you are. That's actually kind of delusional. Like, and that also applies like, oh, we're going to resurrect Republican Spain if you're an anarchist, or, primitive society if you're a primitivist. I mean, very few people are that anymore. I think the reality of that has set in on how dumb that is. But like,
I think it's right-wingers are now.
Yeah.
Like exclusively.
I mean, well, it puts you in a position to be reactionary in the small r sense of that term, right? That you're just trying to bring back a vision of the past. And I do think you can rightly accuse the left, separate from liberals, of being reactionary in the sense that we have been trying to bring back some kind of prior movement whole cloth with minor touches incoherently.
Yeah.
Yep. It's our own sort of bastardized palingenesis, right?
Yeah. Well, on that note, we will probably have this discussion again.
We didn't even get to decadence theory. That was one of the things we were supposed to talk about.
Yes, we are. So we're gonna have to have a sequel in a couple months on decadence theory.
Yeah.
Actually, what I should do is we should actually have some text to talk about, because there's different forms of decadence theory.
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's a really good LibCom article that's incredibly thorough that lists all of the multiple types of decadence theory with like short little discussion or short little explanations about where they come from and what they are. I found it to be very useful. I can send that to you if you like.
Yeah, let's do that. And in like a month, let's discuss that so that we can get the second half of revolutionary pessimism, the decadence part, out. Because when a lot of people hear us talk decadence, they think we mean moral decadence and we have something against queer people or something. Like, no, that's not what we mean at all. That's not
not at all
whatsoever.
Right.
Like,
and this is where we're going to sound like left comms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. We are actually. I about to say the left comms that get mad at me are going to like me again
for a minute.
yeah, until they grok why I believe it. All right. Yeah. I'm going to end. On this note, I find left comms too optimistic that like that's meaningful after the commentary is gone. I just really don't understand what you're the left communist of. I mean, because when I hear like them accusing everybody of being the left of capital, and I'm like, but what are you? It's not like you don't live in a capitalist society. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Like, your ideological purity exempts you from the society you live in? I don't think so.
Yep.
And on that note, see you in a bit.